The massive sensor station floated silently in the cold darkness of space, far from any planet or star. Its crystal parts glowed softly as they searched for danger across the galaxy. This was the Zephyrian Empire's most powerful early warning system, designed to spot enemy ships before they could threaten Imperial worlds. Jin rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of his cold coffee. He had been watching the sensor screens for 12 hours straight, and his shift would not end for another 4. The endless stream of numbers and charts usually showed nothing but empty space and distant stars. That was how he liked it. Boring meant safe, and safe meant the Empire was secure. But today would be different. A bright red warning light suddenly flashed on his main screen. Jin nearly dropped his coffee cup as he leaned forward, his heart racing. The computer was showing something that should not exist. "Admiral Tay," Jin shouted across the control room, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. "You need to see this right now." Admiral Tay had been reviewing daily reports at her desk when she heard Jin's urgent call. She was a tough woman who had spent 30 years in the Imperial Navy, fighting pirates and rebels across the galaxy. Very few things could surprise her anymore, but the panic in Jin's voice made her move quickly. She walked over to his station, her heavy boots clicking on the metal floor. Other operators turned to watch, sensing that something important was happening. The control room, which had been filled with quiet conversation and the gentle hum of machines, suddenly became very quiet. "What am I looking at?" Tay asked, staring at the strange readings on Jin's screen. "A ship appeared at grid 77 Alpha, Jin explained, pointing at the display. "But Admiral, this doesn't make any sense. The energy signature is huge, bigger than anything we have ever seen. But there is no engine trail, no warp signature, nothing that shows how it got there." Tay studied the data carefully. According to the sensors, an unknown vessel had appeared in empty space for exactly 4.7 seconds, then vanished completely. The readings showed power levels that would require a ship the size of a small moon, but there was no evidence of how such a massive vessel could move without leaving any trace. "This has to be a sensor error," Tay said firmly. "Run a full diagnostic on all systems." But Hannah, the station's chief analyst, was already shaking her head. She had pulled up the diagnostic results on her own screen and was comparing them to thousands of previous sensor malfunctions. "Admiral, I have checked everything twice," Hannah said quietly. "The sensors are working perfectly. These readings do not match any known error pattern in our database. Whatever appeared out there was real, and it used technology we do not understand." The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone stared at the impossible information on their screens. For over 1,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming military force. Their ships were the fastest, their weapons the most powerful, their sensors the most advanced. No enemy had ever surprised them like this. Jin looked around the room at his fellow operators. Some looked confused, others frightened. They all understood what this meant, even if they did not want to admit it. Somewhere out there was a ship that could appear and disappear at will, using technology far beyond anything the Empire possessed. Admiral Tay stood quietly for a long moment, thinking about what to do next. She had to report this to Imperial Command. But how could she explain something that seemed impossible? How could she describe a ship that defied every law of physics they knew? None of them realized that this brief, mysterious appearance was just the beginning. The Empire's days of going unchallenged across the galaxy had just started counting down to an end they could never imagine. Captain Day gripped the armrest of his command chair as his 3 destroyers raced through space toward the coordinates, where the mysterious ship had appeared. The engines roared at maximum power, pushing the vessels faster than they had ever traveled before. Time was critical. If there were any clues left behind by the unknown vessel, they needed to find them, quickly before the evidence disappeared. The bridge of Day's flagship buzzed with activity. Officers ran between stations, checking instruments and preparing scanning equipment. Everyone knew this was no ordinary mission. Word had already spread through the fleet about the impossible sensor readings from the detection station. Some crew members whispered nervously among themselves, while others worked with grim determination. "ETA to target zone, 2 minutes," announced the helmsman, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension in his voice. Captain Day was a veteran of dozens of battles and investigations. His weathered face showed the scars of many conflicts, and his grey hair spoke of years spent protecting the Empire's borders. But in all his decades of service, he had never encountered anything like this. Ships did not simply appear and vanish without leaving traces. It violated everything he knew about space travel and physics. "Sir," Lieutenant Sue called out from the sensor station, excitement and confusion mixing in her voice, "I'm picking up something strange. There are particle traces scattered throughout this area, but they don't match anything in our databases." Day moved quickly to her station, studying the readings over her shoulder. The sensors showed tiny fragments of unknown materials floating in space, as if left behind by the mysterious vessel. But the computer analysis was disturbing. "These isotopes are completely unknown to our science," Sue continued, her fingers flying over the controls as she ran test after test. "According to our physics, some of these elements shouldn't be able to exist. They're too unstable, too exotic. Yet here they are, floating in space like breadcrumbs left by whoever was here." Before Day could respond, Navigator Wu spoke up from the communications station. His face was pale as he monitored incoming messages from across the galaxy. "Captain, you need to hear this," Wu said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm receiving reports from every corner of known space. The Arctanian Republic detected a phantom ship near their capital world. The Vegan Trade Union reported the same thing at their main shipping hub. Even the independent colonies are sending in similar reports." Day felt a cold chill run down his spine. This was not just about the Empire anymore. Whatever these beings were, they were watching everyone. Every major government, every important trade route, every significant world in the galaxy had been visited by these mysterious ships. "Show me the pattern," Day ordered, and Wu projected a galactic map onto the main screen. Red dots appeared across the display, each one representing a phantom ship sighting. The pattern was unmistakable. The unknown vessels had appeared near military bases, trade centers, and population hubs throughout the galaxy. They were not random appearances. This was organized, systematic observation. "Sir," whispered one of the junior officers, "it looks like they're mapping everything, every strategic location, every important world." Day studied the map, his experienced military mind processing the implications. Whatever technology allowed these ships to appear and vanish at will was far beyond anything the Empire or any other known civilization possessed. Worse, the systematic nature of the sightings suggested intelligence and planning. He opened a secure channel to Imperial Command, knowing that his report would send shockwaves through the highest levels of government. "Command, this is Captain Day," he said, his voice steady despite his growing concern. "I'm at the anomaly site, and what we're seeing here changes everything. This isn't an isolated incident or a sensor malfunction. Someone with technology beyond our understanding is watching us all." The war room aboard the Imperial flagship was the most secure location in the entire galaxy. Deep within the massive vessel's armored hull, this chamber had been designed to withstand direct hits from planet-killer weapons. The walls were lined with the Empire's most advanced computers, and the air hummed with the power of countless processing units working around the clock. Intelligence Officer Yun stood at the center of the room, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she prepared the most important briefing of her career. Around the massive tactical table sat the Empire's most powerful military leaders, men and women who had conquered entire star systems and crushed rebellions across 1,000 worlds. But today, they looked worried. With a gesture, Yun activated the three-dimensional display. The entire galaxy appeared above the table, spinning slowly in brilliant detail. Then, one by one, red dots began to appear across the star map. Each dot pulsed like a heartbeat, marking the location where a phantom ship had been detected. "What you're seeing here represents every confirmed sighting over the past week," Yun began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. 47 separate appearances across 12 different sectors of the galaxy. The assembled commanders leaned forward, studying the pattern that emerged as more dots appeared. The sightings were not random. They formed a clear, deliberate network across the most important locations in known space. They're hitting our strategic points, Yun continued, highlighting clusters of red dots. Major trade routes where our merchant fleets carry goods between worlds, military installations where we store our most powerful weapons, population centers with billions of citizens who depend on Imperial protection. General Q rose from his chair, his battle-scarred face grim as he studied the display. His hands, marked with old wounds from countless fights, were clasped tightly behind his back. He had spent 40 years building the Empire's military power, turning their forces into the most feared fighting machine the galaxy had ever seen. "This is reconnaissance," he said firmly. "Someone is mapping our entire infrastructure. They know where our bases are, where our ships patrol, where our people live. But why reveal themselves? Any competent spy network would remain hidden." Admiral Ney slammed her fist on the table, causing several junior officers to jump. She was known throughout the fleet for her quick temper and aggressive tactics. "But how is this possible?" she demanded. "Our fleets are positioned at every major system. We have sensor networks that can detect a single fighter craft from 3 star systems away. Nothing should be able to move through our territory undetected." Yun manipulated the display, zooming in on specific sightings. The details she revealed made the situation even more disturbing. "Admiral, that's exactly the problem. They're not moving through our territory. They're appearing inside our sensor perimeters, inside our defensive lines, sometimes within kilometers of our most heavily guarded facilities." She highlighted a recent sighting that had occurred just hours earlier. This phantom ship appeared directly above the Imperial Naval Academy on Zentara Prime. It materialized inside the planetary defense grid, stayed for 4.2 seconds, then vanished. Our sensors detected no approach, no departure, no energy signature that would indicate how it got there. The room fell completely silent as the full implications of this information sank in. These mysterious beings were not sneaking past Imperial defenses. They were simply ignoring them entirely, appearing wherever they wanted as if the Empire's mighty military forces did not exist. General Q sat down heavily, his confidence shaken for the first time in decades. "If they can appear anywhere, at any time without warning," he began, then stopped, unable to finish the thought. "Then our entire defense strategy is worthless," Admiral Ney completed grimly. "Whatever technology these beings possess, it makes our fleets, our weapons, our entire military, might completely obsolete." The silence stretched on as each commander contemplated what this meant for the Empire that had ruled unopposed for 1,000 years. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out at the empty space where Imperial intelligence predicted the next phantom ship would appear. Around her, the most advanced ambush fleet in the Empire's history waited, in perfect silence. 12 massive warships hung motionless in the void, their hulls shimmering with cloaking technology that made them nearly invisible. This was the Empire's best chance to finally confront the mysterious beings who had been appearing throughout the galaxy. After studying the pattern of sightings for days, the smartest minds in Imperial intelligence had calculated exactly where and when the next phantom ship would materialize. Everything depended on the next 17 minutes. Lee had been chosen to lead this mission because of her reputation for quick thinking and decisive action. She had commanded fleets in dozens of battles, always emerging victorious through superior tactics and ruthless efficiency. But today felt different. Today, she was facing an enemy that defied everything she understood about warfare and technology. "Status. Report," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tense silence on the bridge. Communications Officer Bay checked his instruments carefully. "All ships are in position and report ready, Admiral. Cloaking systems are operating at maximum efficiency. The enemy shouldn't be able to detect us until we're ready to strike." Lee nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their cloaking technology might be useless against beings who could appear and vanish at will. Still, this ambush represented the Empire's best hope of finally getting answers about who was watching them and why. "Remember," she announced to her crew, "when that ship appears, we'll have maybe 5 seconds before it vanishes again. Full sensor sweep first to gather as much data as possible, then immediate communication attempts. We need to make contact before it disappears." The minutes ticked by slowly. Every officer on the bridge watched their instruments carefully, waiting for the telltale energy signature that would announce the phantom ship's arrival. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Then, exactly when intelligence had predicted, the space in front of them began to shimmer like heat waves, rising from hot metal. The air itself seemed to bend and twist as reality warped around an invisible presence. What emerged from that distortion took everyone's breath away. The phantom ship was unlike anything in the Empire's vast databases of vessel designs. It was sleek and graceful, with curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. But what truly shocked the Imperial officers was the power it radiated. Even their most sensitive instruments could barely measure the energy levels coming from the relatively small craft. "By the void," whispered one of the junior officers, "that little ship is putting out more power than our entire fleet combined." "Admiral." Lee felt her confidence crumble as she realized that their massive dreadnoughts, armed with weapons capable of destroying planets, looked primitive and clumsy compared to this elegant vessel. It was like comparing stone clubs to energy weapons. Before she could give any orders, her communications console suddenly erupted with lights and alarms. An incoming transmission was flooding their systems with data. "Admiral," Bay shouted over the noise. "We're receiving a message." The transmission came through in perfect Imperial standard, spoken in a calm, friendly voice that somehow made the situation even more unsettling. "We know you're there." Gunner Ryu's hands flew to his weapons, console his training taking over despite his shock. But before he could target the phantom ship, it simply vanished, leaving nothing but empty space and the lingering impression of overwhelming technological superiority. The entire ambush fleet sat in stunned silence. 12 of the most powerful warships ever built rendered helpless by a brief, polite warning from beings who could have destroyed them all without effort. Deep beneath the surface of the Imperial capital world, in a facility that officially did not exist, Dr. Han rubbed her tired eyes and reached for another cup of coffee. She had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to decode the mysterious transmission that had come from the phantom ship. The simple message, "We know you're there," had seemed straightforward enough, but her analysis had revealed something far more disturbing. Hidden within those 4 innocent words were thousands of data packets, compressed and encrypted using methods that challenged everything she knew about information science. Working alongside her was May, the Empire's best cryptographer, whose fingers had been flying across her keyboard for hours as she tried to unlock the secrets buried in the transmission. The Imperial intelligence complex around them buzzed with activity. This underground facility housed the Empire's most sensitive operations, and today it felt like the center of a brewing storm. Officers hurried through corridors carrying classified reports, while computer screens throughout the building displayed urgent priority messages from across the galaxy. "I think I've got another section decoded," May announced, her voice hoarse from hours of concentration. She had dark circles under her eyes, but her excitement was unmistakable. "Han, you need to see this immediately." Dr. Han moved to May's workstation, where lines of decoded information were streaming across multiple monitors. What she saw made her blood run cold. The screen displayed detailed technical drawings of Imperial warships, complete with specifications, weapon layouts, and defensive capabilities. "These are the schematics for our newest battleships," Han whispered, her voice barely audible. "The Titan-class destroyers that were just completed last month. These designs are classified above top secret. Only 12 people in the entire Empire have access to these files." May highlighted another section of decoded data, and the information that appeared was even more shocking. "Look at this," she said, her hands shaking slightly. "Personal files on Admiral Tay, General Q, even Director Rowe himself, their service records, their family members, their private communications with their spouses." The 2 women stared at the screens in growing horror as more data continued to decode itself. The phantom beings had not just been watching Imperial military operations. They knew intimate details about the lives of high-ranking officials, information that should have been impossible to obtain. Director Rowe entered the room just as another wave of decoded information appeared on the monitors. He was a man who had spent his entire career dealing with secrets and classified information, but what he saw on those screens made him feel physically sick. How is this possible, he asked, studying the personal files of people he had worked with for decades. Some of this information exists only in hard copy files locked in vaults beneath the Imperial Palace. There's no way anyone could have accessed it remotely. Dr. Han pointed to the timestamps embedded in the data files. Sir, that's not the worst part. Look at when this information was collected. The timestamps told a story that none of them wanted to believe. Some of the data dated back decades, others went back centuries. The phantom beings had been watching the Empire since its founding, carefully documenting every major decision, every military development, every secret operation. They've been observing us our entire history, May said quietly. They know about battles we fought before any of us were born. They have records of treaties we signed, wars we started, people. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Director Rose sank into a chair, the weight of the revelation crushing down on him. For over 1,000 years, the Empire had believed itself to be the dominant force in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, enslaved entire species, and built their power through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. But now they knew the truth. All along someone had been watching, someone with technology so advanced that Imperial science seemed primitive by comparison, someone who had been carefully documenting every action the Empire had taken. They've been watching us the entire time, he whispered, staring at the endless stream of decoded information. But why reveal themselves now? After all these centuries of silent observation, why make contact today? The question hung in the air like a death sentence, because deep down, they all suspected they knew the answer. The phantom beings had finally seen enough. Emperor Vashitok paced back and forth in his private chambers, his expensive robes swishing with each angry step. The most powerful man in the galaxy had not slept in 3 days, and it showed in his bloodshot eyes and trembling hands. Reports kept flooding in from every corner of the Empire, each one more disturbing than the last. The phantom ships were no longer content to appear at military bases and trade routes. Now they were materializing inside the most secure facilities, in Imperial space. Yesterday, one had appeared in the private office of the Minister of Defense while he was reviewing classified battle plans. Another had materialized in the bedroom of Admiral Chen while she slept, hovering silently over her bed for 4 seconds before vanishing. "This is impossible," the Emperor shouted, throwing a crystal decanter against the wall where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. "How can they penetrate our most secure locations? We have force fields, energy barriers, the finest security systems in the galaxy." His personal aide, a nervous young man named Jun, cowered near the door as the Emperor's rage filled the room. "Your Majesty, the security chief believes they might be using some form of dimensional technology that allows them to bypass our defenses entirely." The Emperor stopped pacing and fixed Jun with a stare that could melt steel. "Dimensional technology? Are you telling me these beings can step outside of reality itself?" Before Jun could answer, the chamber doors burst open, and General Nam strode in, his face grim with determination. Nam was one of the Empire's most ruthless military commanders, a man who had personally overseen the destruction of rebel worlds and the subjugation of entire species. "Your Majesty," Nam announced, his voice filled with barely controlled fury, "enough is enough. We cannot allow these phantom ships to mock our power any longer. I have taken the liberty of authorizing the use of planet-killer weapons for the next confirmed sighting." The Emperor's eyes widened. Planet-killer weapons were the Empire's ultimate deterrent, massive devices capable of cracking worlds in half and turning entire star systems into cosmic dust. They had been used only 3 times in Imperial history, each deployment serving as a warning to potential rebels about the price of defying Imperial authority. "General, those weapons have never been tested against targets this small and mobile," the Emperor said, though there was approval in his voice. "But perhaps overwhelming firepower is exactly what we need." Nam nodded grimly. "The fleet commanders have their orders. The moment one of these phantom ships appears and stays visible for more than 2 seconds, we will unleash enough destructive force to vaporize everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius." As if summoned by their conversation about ultimate weapons, the air in the throne room suddenly began to shimmer and distort. Both men turned toward the massive golden throne that dominated the chamber, the symbol of imperial power that had remained unchanged for over a millennium. The space, directly above the throne, twisted like heated air, and then reality seemed to tear open. A sleek, elegant vessel materialized in the sacred space above the Emperor's seat of power, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly light that made the golden throne look dull by comparison. For 3 eternal seconds, the phantom ship hovered in complete silence. It was small enough to fit inside the throne room, yet it radiated power that made the massive palace around it feel fragile and temporary. Every person in the chamber could feel the energy emanating from the craft, a force so advanced that it made imperial technology seem like stone tools. Palace Guard Captain Cho, trained from birth to protect the Emperor's life, drew his energy weapon and aimed it at the hovering vessel. His hands shook as he held the weapon, understanding even as he did so that his advanced military sidearm was utterly useless against beings who could appear inside the most secure room in the Empire. Courtiers screamed and fled toward the exits, their elegant clothes and sophisticated manners forgotten in the face of technology that defied comprehension. Servants dropped expensive dishes and priceless artifacts as they ran, the sound of breaking treasures echoing through the vast chamber. But Emperor Vashatok remained frozen on his throne, staring up at the craft that had materialized above his head. In that moment, the reality of his situation finally sank in completely. All his power, all his weapons, all his mighty fleets and conquered worlds meant nothing to these beings. "They can go anywhere," he whispered, his voice barely audible, in the chaos around him. "We're completely defenseless." At exactly 1423 Imperial Standard Time, every computer terminal, communication device and display screen throughout the Zephyrian Empire activated simultaneously. From the grandest military headquarters to the smallest outpost stations, the same transmission began playing across billions of screens throughout the galaxy. Archivist Seo was cataloging ancient historical documents in the Imperial archives when her workstation suddenly came alive with incoming data. The quiet, dimly lit chamber where she spent her days organizing the Empire's official history was filled with the glow of activated monitors. At first, she thought it was a system malfunction, but then she realized what she was seeing. The transmission contained video footage, documents, and records that made her hands shake as she watched. These were not the sanitized historical accounts that filled the Empire's official textbooks. These were raw, unedited recordings of events that the Empire had worked for centuries to hide from its own people. "Director Kim," she called out, her voice cracking with shock. "You need to see this right now." Director Kim hurried over from his office, expecting to deal with another routine technical problem, but when he saw what was playing on Seo's screen, his face went pale. The footage showed Imperial warships bombarding defenseless planets, entire civilizations being wiped out by weapons of mass destruction. "These show the Marthan genocide," Seo whispered, pointing at images of a beautiful world being torn apart by Imperial planet crackers. The orbital bombardment of the Kepler colonies, the biological warfare campaigns against the Centauri Republic. "Director, these are atrocities that supposedly never happened. The Empire destroyed all evidence of these operations centuries ago. But here was the proof, playing in crystal clear detail across their screens. Millions of innocent beings dying. As the Empire expanded its territory through systematic extermination, entire species enslaved or eliminated to make room for imperial colonies. War crimes that violated every principle of civilized behavior, all documented with the cold precision of security camera footage. Director Kim studied the transmission's source data, hoping to find some explanation for how anyone could have obtained such detailed records. What he discovered made the situation even more disturbing. "The signal is coming from the Sol system," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Specifically from a small blue planet called Earth." Seo looked up from her screen in confusion. "Earth? Isn't that one of those primitive worlds we catalogued, but never bothered to contact? The species there barely has space travel technology." Kim pulled up the Imperial star charts, highlighting the insignificant yellow star and its third planet. According to their records, Earth was home to a species, called humans who had only recently developed basic rocket technology. They were considered so backward that the Empire had classified them as not worth the effort of conquest. How could a primitive civilization have access to our most classified historical records? Kim wondered aloud. The answer came in the form of a text message that appeared on every screen throughout the facility. Written in perfect Imperial standard, it explained everything in terms that left no room for doubt. We are the humans of Earth. For 300 years we have watched your empire spread across the galaxy like a plague. We have documented every world you have destroyed, every species you have enslaved, every innocent life you have taken in, your quest for power. We developed our technology not for conquest but for justice. We have been preparing for this moment since the day we first detected your ships in our solar system. Director Kim sank into a chair, the full implications of the message hitting him like a physical blow. The humans had not just been observing Imperial expansion randomly, they had been specifically studying the Empire's methods, learning about their technology, and preparing for some form of confrontation. The message says they've been watching our expansion for generations. CO continued reading. They've developed their advanced technology specifically to judge us. Across the Empire, in thousands of facilities on hundreds of worlds, the same realization was dawning on Imperial officials. The species they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant had been secretly developing technology far beyond anything the Empire possessed. For centuries, while the Empire conquered and destroyed, humanity had been quietly preparing for this moment of revelation. The most terrifying part was not that humans possessed superior technology. It was that they had used that technology not for conquest or expansion, but to carefully document every crime the Empire had committed. They had become the galaxy's silent witnesses, and now they were ready to serve as its judges. Captain Bock was reviewing supply reports in his office when the alarms began blaring throughout the Imperial garrison. He had been stationed on Kepler-7 for 3 years, maintaining order among the local population and ensuring that tribute payments reached the Imperial treasury on schedule. It was usually quiet, boring work on a planet where the native species had been conquered so long ago that most had forgotten they were ever free. But today was different. Today the phantom ships had returned, and this time they were not disappearing after a few seconds. Bock rushed to the command center, where his officers were staring at their instruments in confusion and growing panic. Through the massive windows that overlooked the planetary capital, he could see a sleek vessel hovering directly above the city center. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, its hull gleaming with energy that made the afternoon sky shimmer like heat waves. "Sir," Sergeant Jun called out from the communications station, his voice tight with worry. "I'm receiving reports from garrisons across the Empire. The phantom ships have appeared simultaneously on every Imperial world, and they're all doing the same thing." Captain Bock grabbed a pair of binoculars and focused on the city below. What he saw made his blood run cold. The human vessel was projecting massive holographic displays into the sky, images so large that every person on the planet's surface could see them clearly. And what those images showed was the true history of the Zephyrian Empire. The first hologram showed Imperial warships surrounding a peaceful world, its green continents and blue oceans clearly visible. Then came the bombardment. Planet-cracking weapons tore the world apart, turning a living planet into floating debris and cosmic dust. The timestamp in the corner of the image showed this had happened over 200 years ago, but the footage was crystal clear, as if it had been recorded yesterday. "They're showing the Marthan genocide," whispered one of the junior officers, recognizing the historical event that Imperial textbooks claimed had never occurred. More images followed. Entire species being herded into concentration camps, biological weapons being deployed against civilian populations, children being separated from their families and shipped off to work in Imperial mining operations. Every war crime the Empire had committed over 1,000 years of expansion was being displayed for all to see. On the planet's surface, the reaction was immediate and explosive. The native species of Kepler-7 had been told that the Empire had liberated them from primitive conditions and brought them civilization and order. They had been taught that their previous governments had been corrupt and violent, and that Imperial rule was a blessing, but now they were seeing the truth. Imperial forces had not liberated Kepler-7. They had conquered it, enslaved its population, and systematically destroyed its culture and history. The holographic displays showed their own ancestors being gunned down by Imperial troops, their cities being bombed, their leaders being executed in public squares. "Sir," reported Communications Officer San, his hands shaking as he monitored the planetary communication networks, "revolution is breaking out in every major city. The local population is rising up against our administrative centers. They're demanding answers, demanding justice for what was done to their people." Captain Bock watched helplessly as crowds gathered in the streets below, their anger growing with each new revelation projected into the sky. His garrison contained only 300 Imperial troops, but the planet had a population of over 50 million. If even a fraction of those people decided to march on the garrison, his forces would be overwhelmed in minutes. "This is happening everywhere," June continued, monitoring reports from across the Empire. "Every world where we have garrisons is experiencing the same uprising. The humans are exposing everything simultaneously." Then, cutting through the chaos of panicked communications from Imperial forces throughout the galaxy, came a calm, human voice speaking in perfect Imperial standard. Officer San played the transmission over the command center's speakers, and every person in the room fell silent to listen. "People of the galaxy," the voice said, neither threatening nor pleading, simply stating facts. "We are not invaders. We are not conquerors. We are witnesses. For centuries we have watched and documented the crimes committed by the Zephyrian Empire. We have preserved the evidence that they tried to destroy. The truth cannot be hidden forever." As Captain Bock watched the crowds below growing larger and angrier, he realized what the humans had accomplished. They had not needed to fire a single shot or deploy a single weapon. They had simply shown the galaxy's oppressed populations what had really been done to them, and the Empire's own subjects were tearing it apart from within. The humans had achieved what no military force in galactic history had managed. They had turned the Empire against itself, using nothing but the truth. 6 months had passed since the day the phantom ships appeared above every Imperial world, and the galaxy had changed completely. Former Imperial Admiral Yu stood in what had once been the Empire's Grand Senate chamber, but now served as the meeting hall for the new Confederation. The golden Imperial symbols had been removed from the walls, replaced by simple banners representing hundreds of liberated worlds. Around the massive circular assembly floor, delegates from across the galaxy worked together to write the laws and principles that would govern their new government. Species that had been enemies for centuries now sat side by side, united by their shared experience of Imperial oppression and their hope for a better future. Yu watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. She had served the Empire faithfully for 30 years, believing she was protecting civilization and bringing order to a chaotic galaxy. Now she knew the truth about what the Empire had really done, and the weight of that knowledge sat heavy on her shoulders. At the center of the assembly, Ambassador Park was addressing the gathered delegates. She was humanity's first official, representative to the galaxy, a middle-aged woman whose calm demeanor and gentle voice had become symbols of hope for billions of people across hundreds of worlds. "My fellow citizens of the galaxy," Park began, her words translated instantly into thousands of languages. "Many of you have asked why humanity waited so long to reveal ourselves, why we watched your suffering for generations without intervening directly." The assembly hall fell silent as delegates leaned forward to hear her explanation. This question had haunted many of them since learning about humanity's long observation of galactic events. "The answer is simple," Park continued. "We could have destroyed the Empire at any time. Our technology was advanced enough to turn Imperial worlds into dust, to eliminate their fleets, to conquer their territory. But military force would have made us conquerors, not liberators. We would have become exactly what we sought to defeat." Yu nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in humanity's approach. She had seen what conquest looked like from the Empire's perspective, and she knew it always led to more oppression, more suffering, more injustice. "Instead," Park said, "we chose to wait for the right moment, when the truth itself could become our weapon. We documented every crime, preserved every piece of evidence, and waited until the galaxy was ready to see what had been done in the Empire's name. The results of that patience were visible throughout the assembly hall. Delegates who had spent their lives as imperial subjects now worked as equals with their former oppressors, building a government based on justice rather than fear. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were now free to determine their own futures. In a high-security facility on a distant world, former Emperor Vashatok sat in a small cell, awaiting trial for crimes against entire civilizations. When human representatives had visited him the previous week, he had asked the question that many imperial officials struggled to understand. "Why didn't you just destroy us?" he had demanded, his voice filled with confusion and anger. "You had the power. You could have eliminated the Empire completely." The human response had been delivered with the same calm patience that characterized all their interactions, "Because that would have made us like you." Those words echoed through Yu's mind as she watched the delegates work together on the new Constitution. The humans could have taken revenge for all the suffering the Empire had caused. They could have enslaved or eliminated their former oppressors. Instead, they had insisted on trials, on justice, on building something better, rather than simply destroying what came before. As the day's session came to an end, delegates from dozens of species shook hands, exchanged ideas, and made plans for the future. They argued and debated, but they did so as equals, not as conquerors and conquered. Admiral Yu finally understood what humanity had accomplished. Their greatest weapon had never been their incredible technology or their ability to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. It was their patience, their wisdom, and their unwavering commitment to doing what was right rather than what was easy. The beings that the Empire had dismissed as primitive had taught the galaxy its most important lesson. True strength comes, not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when not to use it. They had shown that justice was more powerful than any weapon, and that the truth, when revealed at the right moment, could change the entire galaxy. The Empire was gone, not destroyed by force, but transformed by exposure to something it had never truly understood: genuine justice and moral courage.